Welcome to Educate Us, a podcast and learning collective that explores the questions shaping education. Through conversations with educators, researchers, scholars, students, and community members, we examine the relationship between learning and lived experience. Together, we explore new possibilities for education and its role in the world around us. I am Dr. Tiffany Smith, educator, curriculum designer, researcher, founder, and host of Educate Us. Thank you for joining. Let's begin. Welcome back to Educate Us. We've reached the final episode of season 1. Over the course of this season, we've been building a conversation about what education can become when learning moves beyond the traditional classroom. We've explored what happens when students are connected to their communities and encouraged to develop their identities and voices. We've considered the importance of giving students agency in their learning. And we've examined what becomes possible when students are invited to create and communicate in ways that reflect the world around them. We've explored community-centered curriculum, multimodal composition, teacher preparation, and the changing needs of today's learners. And as those conversations have unfolded, one thing has become increasingly clear. None of this work happens without leadership. Moving learning beyond the classroom requires more than an innovative idea or a committed teacher. It requires leaders who are willing to create the space for innovation, support educators as they try something different, and rethink what students need from schools as education continues to evolve. So, what does it take to lead learning that actually prepares students for the world they will enter? For our final guest conversation of season 1, we turn to the educational leaders who make this work possible. In this episode, 4 leaders from across the United States and Europe come together to examine what it means to lead real world learning. Joining the conversation are Dr. Delores Wallace-Brown, an experienced educational leader whose work spans K through 12 and higher education in New York and South Carolina. Everett Stembridge, a New York-based education specialist whose background in organizational performance and education brings a systems-level perspective to improving schools. Marian Mansberger, an international management and leadership educator from the University of Applied Sciences in Austria, and Dr. Sharnez Givens-Williams, an elementary school principal, literacy advocate, and educational leader in the St. Louis metropolitan region. Together, we challenge everyone to think beyond curriculum alone. Across differences in geography, generation, educational systems, and leadership experience, one idea continues to surface. Real-world learning requires leadership that listens, collaborates, trusts, supports, and empowers. This is episode 10, Leading Real-World Learning, the final guest conversation of season 1 of Educate Us. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me today. Just to give you a little bit of context, and then we'll do some introductions. But just to give you a little bit of context, this podcast episode is the final episode for the first series. You guys are the top of the food chain with that, and the reason that I saved this conversation for the end is because what I've learned, especially as it pertains to K through 12, teachers are in a lot of cases handed curriculum to implement. In some cases, depending on the institution, teachers have some say, and in some cases, depending on the institution, teachers have full autonomy over the curriculum they employ. But there's a relationship with the principal, with an administrator, to determine how, whether, in what fashion, what's allowed, whether there's funding for certain things, there's a support that has to come from administration to determine whether what they have planned or what is planned happens. So the administrators are the decision makers ultimately. And anybody agree with me on that? Anybody agree with me on that?
Yeah, I do agree because usually the district decides on a curriculum resource and then that resource is implemented, but it's missing some things that students may need. And it's up to the principal to allow for those different changes to be made by the classroom teacher.
A lot of times it depends on the state exams. And so they follow a curriculum to ensure that the students are able to pass those exams. And they try not to veer too far away from them. For example, I invited my son to come in as a keynote speaker. He published 3 different books. And the principal said, yeah, speak to the teachers, and whenever they're ready, they'll do that. But all of the teachers kept telling me, well, we're focusing on getting ready for the regents now. So that's what's driving our curriculum. And I recommended that what he's going to talk about is going to help drive the curriculum faster than it would based on you following a standard curriculum based on the state standards. Because it's going to make kids begin to think critically and question themselves and the world around them.
Got it. So I'm still hearing that the administrators play a major role, though, in what curriculum is embodied. Is that right, Everett? The administrators are still making determinations on what teachers can do.
That's true, but what they're saying is that, well, they're rated. And so their rating is connected to the regents, and the principal is rated based on the percentage of students that pass these exams. So then that becomes the focal point of the curriculum, not just for the principals, but for the teachers and for the school itself. So they have a tendency to be very, very directed. It depends on the school too. Because
I want to jump in, and I'm glad you said that, Everett, because it does depend on the school. Leadership is a critical aspect, administrative leadership. So the principal should be the head learner, right? The head learner should understand that they don't know everything, right? So we understand that when we talk about student learning, we always go back to that it's a 3-legged stool. It's the parent, the student, the teacher. And so when you say teacher, or the educational community. And so a real strong, good academic leader understands that the teachers they're in the classroom, they're on the front line, they understand things about students. And we all know that each generation brings something new. Same with the students. Now we have terms, we call them millennials, Gen Z, blah, 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 right? So teachers are seeing this over and over, so they understand certain things. And no principal is going to be an expert in every field. So if the principal or the administrator, even all the way up to the superintendents, if they're really good instructional leaders, then they understand that that leadership has to be shared with the teacher, making that teacher the leader, because the teacher is the one on the front line that can bring in exactly whatever it said, that can bring the scores in. They can bring, they can get the kids to learn. So it has to be collaborative, but everyone that's a leader just doesn't always understand that. Some people are, I'm the administrator, it's all about me. No. You'll never get there that way. Not authentically.
So let's do a round robin. Let's make it fun. And, definitely say who you are, but give us one word that describes your leadership style.
So my name is Marian. I am located now in Austria in Europe. And I think my one word would be enabling leadership. But then again, I'm in a university education system. I'm the head of a major within an international business school. The reason I think why Tiffany asked me to be here is because my internationality provides a different type of focus, because I've lived in quite a few different countries and know your US education system. No, but I understand your US education system and the funding, particularly the funding for your system, which is so very much different than in many European countries. So maybe I can provide different aspects from that angle as well when it comes really to the schooling system, because not everyone needs to reinvent the wheel all the time, I guess. So, and then from the leadership side, which is my specialty, I would think leadership and international communication and international management. Yeah.
Who's next?
Well, my experience, I worked in the corporate world as a quality and productivity efficiency expert, operations consultant, industrial engineering. Then I worked in the public sector as assistant chief of operations analysis, always improving the performance of the organization. And I did law, and I did a few other things. I sort of like stumbled into education, but I was very successful at improving performance as a teacher at an exceptional level. But I was also good at that in the corporate world. And so I'm using basically the same type of system. It's based on what could I say? Communication, coordination, cooperation, quality improvement, productivity improvement. I worked with Miss Brown, and we turned the school around in 1 year that they thought couldn't do the things that we did. I ran the lower school, and she had the upper school, and we increased their performance by. They were like, we started out by the bottom quartile. We were ranked number 6 in the city of New York for improvement, when the majority of the city, 80% of the schools dropped because it was so hard. But I like one of the unique things that I loved about what Miss Brown had done in that experience was that a lot of the schools focus on, because they isolate. When you talk about real world experiences, education is isolated, whether it's in the college level or it's in the high school level, middle level, social studies, math, they're all separate. But Miss Brown bought these books I had never seen before. But we let's say if it's a math exam, but they're going to study all the classes studied math, social studies, science, ELA. And so what happened is the student got a broader view of whatever subject matter and a deeper understanding of the subject matter, because they weren't looking at it in isolation. Okay, so I'll stop at that. Okay.
I love that you brought up cross-curricular, because in podcast episode number 2 with Ellie Dupre and Sarah J. Ellie Dupre is an English language arts teacher, and Sarah J is the social studies teacher. So they are working collaboratively to bridge the work of English language arts with topics in social studies.
We were including mathematics and science in that paradigm. Also, it wasn't just English and social studies. Is a lot easier to do, but when you include all 4 subjects, and that's when you become a master leader, a master teacher, and that's what a lot of the programs try to do. By when you say real,
I love that.
real experience, even as a student, I never saw those things as being isolated. I saw them as being connected. You know, even if you're doing ELA, there's some mathematics involved. You know, but when I first met Ms. Brown, let's say I went and I helped turn around the English department. They said, we want you to go to math too. And she says, why are you sending him there? He's an English teacher. He's not a math teacher. The other guy says, teacher is a teacher. Let's send him there. And I was able to do that. But it was more culture, more ELA, and more scientific. I'll say something like Albert Einstein said, mathematics is the poetry of logical ideas. I would say, hey, let's do Wadley style. You know, so things like that, which captures their interest and begins to see how it's connected to their everyday life experiences. And so they become more motivated and ready to excel.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that confirmation. Let me just clarify. Did we hear what districts did you work with in New York?
District 3, District 5, District 6. I've been in all the districts because I go to a different school every year. The position that I'm in now, but you know, I've like I said, I've worked in as a management analyst where I advise vice presidents, senior vice presidents, even the CEO to a certain extent about we have a problem and can you go in and solve that problem? And it's not just mathematics or it's not just ELA, but it's also leadership and with real world problems and understanding people. And so when a student, for example, student graduates from college and now they're working at CVS as a cashier, what happened on that journey? Whereas the student can't make the connection between higher level positions given the higher level exposure she got in school. And so I think that's one of the things we talk about, real life learning that's missing in the programs. And I think it's part of it is character education and incorporating that and inspiring them to think critically and to question and to say, what is my worth? This is
absolutely.
Come in as a manager or cashier. I mean, I have a bachelor's science degree. Everybody else in here they don't even have a high school diploma. Why am I here? So
I love that.
Thank you.
No, I do because I'm thinking about the podcast episode that launched today, focused on agency, because that's just what you touched on. In order for them to be able to make decisions about, do I want to be a cashier? Do I want to be a manager? They have to understand their agency. They have to be able to embody that wherever they go. And that's just what you reinforced and what you shared. So I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just really love that you reinforced that we've been focusing on agency for the last 3 episodes and really getting into that, the power of self-worth and self-definition in podcast episode number 5. So anyway, thank you. I would love Dr. Wallace-Brown for you to build on some of the things he just shared about you that I didn't even know, but I'd love to hear you build on that. Like, what did you do in New York? I don't know anything about this life of yours.
Okay. Now that's my real life. My real life is in New York. This is my second time around doing something at Morris.
Yeah.
But anyway, I love Morris. Love what I do. But anyhow, back to whatever it said. I stumbled into education also, like Everett. I was doing something else. I was actually a public administrator in the world of government. I went to University of Miami, and so I worked for Dade County government in management for a while, and then decided, okay, well, I'm going back. I'm going to do a law degree. Okay, but the hurricane happened, so that just didn't pan out. So I said, okay, I'll do something else. Make it all short, I decided, okay, this isn't my home. Let me get out of here, go back to New York. Went back to New York, did some work with multicultural education from a public administration perspective. And then I started learning more and more and more about education, which I said I'd never do. I'd never teach. I'm not going in that world because that's not for me. But I learned so much about it. And so then I have a sister who's a teacher. She invited me. She says, well, you should just sub and see if you like it. So I did. I ended up really loving it. Ended up going through the ranks, became a principal. But what I learned that was the most important thing is that we are leaders of change, right? You got to be a leader of change because the world is changing and it's changing fast. And you have to be able to change. If you're going to do the same old stuff, you're going to get the same results. We know that. So I ended up going into the administration and stumbled upon Everett, because in New York City, I think we had 615 students. And so we had a lot of grade levels. We had a lot of teachers that had been there. We had new ones coming in, met Everett. And my position was, okay, I'm the head learner. I knew what it felt like to be a teacher. And I knew the things that I needed to help me grow and be the best educator that I could be. I knew that you have to have a vision, right? So that vision is not just your vision. You're not just the top-down person where you're on the front line and everybody's just following the leader. No, you have to listen to the voices around you and collaborate. So we met. I go in his classrooms because, you have to go in New York City. You go and you evaluate the teacher. And for me, that's going in, observing, listening, learning, and not just being like a fly on the wall, but actually walking around, looking at what the students are doing, just taking a quick peek, seeing what they're doing, maybe even stopping, asking the students, so what are you learning? What do you think of this? And the students are wonderful. Oh, they love to give feedback. So I went to his classroom and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. These were students that I knew, some of the hardest students. And he was actually put in that classroom because they needed someone like him, in my opinion, that could be firm but fair. And let me tell you, the changes that I saw in those students got to the point where students were taking their books on the elevator, reading their books in other classrooms. So then when I got a chance to actually share my vision, got the teachers to buy in, once they realized that I wasn't going to be one of those top-down people, but more of a leader. Long story short, we developed a curriculum together. We did some reading across the curriculum. And that's when we utilized every aspect of instruction. And the teachers started collaborating more because they need to talk to each other. And as they began to plan together and share some of what was coming out of their classrooms, and it just became a real open dialogue where everybody wanted to do their job. So anyhow, that's kind of what happened to New York City. The school went from the bottom to the top.
Oh,
Same
wow.
here. I
love that.
Similar here because it's not about an individual. The leader, the administrator, their job is to unleash the power within the teacher.
So how long were you there?
In New York City? I don't want to date myself. Let's say more than 10 years. More than 10 years.
Okay. Yeah. And then you were at Morris after that, or
after that? I was in I created my own private school here in South Carolina.
Okay.
And did the same thing. Yeah.
I did not know you had your own school.
Yeah, we won the highest awards, palmetto, gold, and silver. That's high as it can get.
Oh, and wow. What are you doing at Morris now? What are you doing at Morris?
Okay. At Morris, I'm the director of organizational management. It's under the division of business. What I like about this program is the students have to come in with 2 years of credit. So it's for students that started and dropped out. Now they're adults, and they could be anywhere from 24 all the way up to 70. Okay, my oldest grad is 70. And they decide, hey, it's time to get my degree because I can't move up. And so we have that program. When I got there, very few students. And now for the last 6 years, it's been the number one program graduating the most students of all the majors. We had 21 majors. So for the last 6 years, because it's grown. And it's because of that model. You empower, like in higher ed, you don't go in telling them what to do, but you still have to observe, and you still have to listen, and you have those conversations. And when teachers know you're behind them, and if they say they need something, and you know that, if they need development and they're telling you, well, I'd like to learn a little bit more about how to teach online, then you got to give it. So it's the same thing. It's collaboration. It is.
And you said business, right?
My program is organizational management. It's a management program, and it's under the division of business. So, and so, it's all about empowerment, and the leadership is about support, not destroy, but support.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Most of the people in the podcast series are St. Louis representatives from many different St. Louis schools here in St. Louis. And I'm so grateful to have Sharnez with us today because she's representing St. Louis. So, Sharnez.
Hello, my name is Sharnez Givens-Williams. I am currently a principal of an elementary school in Webster Groves School District. Webster Groves is small, quaint. I mean, you can kind of agree, Tiffany. It's like small, quaint. But like all districts, it has complexities to it. So I'm actually starting my first principalship this year. I was an AP or assistant principal for 5 years. Before that, I was a teacher, a high school English teacher for 9 years and a reading specialist. So I have a lot of different background. I also taught ELL students. So I'm kind of all over the place. But going back to your slide, you said one word to describe my leadership. It would be relational. So I'm with you, Delores. Like I'm all about relationships and making sure that everybody feels comfortable and confident in my building. So even as an AP, that's what I did. And right now I'm kind of starting from the ground up with building relationships because I have like 60% new staff. So I have to start and really start planting those seeds. So I was calling myself a relational leader.
In everything that I was planning, I imagined myself strictly having a conversation with the principal just so I could get through to the teacher. Like I did not understand, and what you guys are helping me understand, and what a lot of what I've learned already is this partnership and this relationship between the administration and teachers when it comes to implementing curriculum. Let's get into this vision for real world learning.
You know what struck me as very interesting now is, and I mean, again, I'm privileged because I've lived so many different places and was always so curious too. That's why I had to live there, right? Otherwise I could have just visited or traveled there, but I really want to understand places. But what is really interesting from all of it, everything you're saying, what I listen to now, what struck me as interesting is like, and it's related to your educational system, what is the higher goal of everything in the end? Because you say things like, I wrote it down, you should be, that there is a change and people should be critical and people should be able to draw connections and correlate information from one topic to the next, right? But we are still talking at such a small educational level like K or even middle school or high school. So I'm thinking that what's the ultimate goal, like the ultimate goal for the whole of the society? Well, obviously, like, I'm sorry, Sharnez, like if you're a principal of the school, obviously, like your goal is from to get your kids from one grade to the next, to the final grade, so they can then enter the society for the next step, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're a principal in a school. So at university, we prepare the students to leave the university then for their next step for a career. But like, what's the higher goal? Because I see in the US particularly, since you have so many districts and you're funded differently, and there are private schools and there are non-private schools, and they're socially disadvantaged areas and they're not, and everybody has different funding. So you make do with so little at some times, right? That the conglomerate of positive effect for the society seems so like random out there in the air, right?
So are you saying, like, do you mean fragmented? Do you mean fragmented?
Like what's the ultimate goal? Like, okay, we prepare the people in little schools for being a good person, being aware, understanding of A and B and C and D and the society and the environment. But like, what's the ultimate goal even? Right?
Well, in America, in America and in any society, you have standards. And so those standards is what gives people a target. For example, if we were to talk about elementary school, if a kid is not reading by the third grade, then that becomes a problem, because that's going to affect him throughout his educational experience. So then there's this social promotion. Let's say if a kid comes to high school and he cannot read, then we have special education programs. So ultimately, there's a new superintendent. His focus, he was an elementary school teacher. And then he was a superintendent, and now he's chancellor of the school system. His focus is elementary school. I think that's a great focus, because I've known with my own kids, I make sure that they learn at a very young age. And once they have that, let's see, if they love reading, then they can begin to grow throughout their educational experience, irregardless of what happens to them. If you understand what I'm saying in terms of that.
I understand what you're saying, but the standards are not clear to me, because if there are so many districts and schools and states and cities that are funded differently, I did notice that the standards of a high school graduate in regard to knowledge and perception and understanding of the world and the knowledge is not really a standard. It's on all different steps of the ladder. And that's, I guess, what my question is. So what is the
the point is each of those kids have parents. So your parents is your first teacher, right? So if your parents don't provide you with a certain education, then you go into the school system. Then that falls on the teacher. So how is the teacher going to handle that particular child? They have to teach 30 students. So then we have special education programs to hopefully capture that kid before they just drop out. And then, as Ms. Brown talked about, even on a college level, she has adults who have 20 credits and they want to continue with their education. In the high school level, you might have kids that are 19 and they only have 2 or 3 credits. So what do? You could go to an independent high school that accelerates the learning process. But ultimately, they're human beings. They're going to learn anyway. Okay, so they might say, okay, well, this kid is in special ed, but when he comes into the community, he's not special ed. He's a kid. Do you understand?
I think this question though is around programming. Correct me if I'm wrong. So, I think this is a question of whether what is the programming setting students up for? And I think the answer for all of us, if we can agree on one thing, no matter what the programming is at Webster or district number 5 or whatever it is, at the end of the day, we're preparing them for the life beyond their educational experience, wherever that ends. Mm-hmm. So for some, it'll end at 16.
Yeah, to be global citizens at the end of the day, like we the whole point, or a lot of standards for states, line up to being global citizens. So making sure that when they go into the world, they are prepared academically, emotionally, socially, and they can walk into the world ready. So I don't know if that answers your question, Marion, but I know that a lot of school districts, especially in this area, have been moving towards more like a social emotional approach when it comes to core values, especially elementary level core values and what is it, Portrait of a Graduate. So they're looking a little bit deeper than just academics, is moving into the social emotional realm as well.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, there's another part to this. When we think of it as a system, okay. So when we think of education as a system, and I hear what you're saying, Shanez, I agree. A lot of the educators are coming in like thinking that way, and that's the new movement. But it is a system. And our problem is when we look at education, it hasn't really changed much since its inception in this country. Technically, we're still doing somewhat of chalk and talk. Okay. While the chalkboard may not be there, but it's still at some places, like at Morris, we have a chalkboard. So, but teaching, you're going to go to the board, smart board, you're going to write on it, right? So here we go, chalk and talk. The other part of that is when we look at the system of education, education has, and in Drucker was his name, one of the theorists. He said in the future, and this was back in the 90s, he says in the future, as education progresses, it's going to become more politically volatile. And that's what we're dealing with. It's the politics that has gotten involved. And to Marion's point, that's it's like, well, what do you want? You say you want this, you have these standards, you're saying this, you're saying that, you have elementary, you have middle, you have high. And then now back to Stimbridge's point. That kid, I love what you said. I'm going to remember that. I may write it in a book. The kid is not a special education student when he goes back in the community. He's just Ishmael or whoever he is. Or Janet. It's just it's a person in the community. But going to Sharon, that's what she said about globalization. We know we're moving to a global world. And our job is to try to make sure the next generation is ready for it. Ready or not, it's here. Okay. But it's really not set up properly because we're still doing what we did a long time ago. And it's not working. Because now you have, if you look at the statistics on the single parented household, not that a single parent can't make it happen, because I'm telling you, I know quite a bit that have. But overall, then you have all these kids. Remember now, this is 2026. Who remembers what happened in the 80s? I'm dating myself. In the 80s, there was a big epidemic that hit our community. The poor are a little lower than middle income families, which the majority are in public schools, right? So 80, they're 40 years old now, this 20 years later, that has impacted those families. It was called crack cocaine. Where the families got split up, where there were people. I met a police officer. She says, oh, I have a sister. My sister has 6 kids. And my mother was taking them all. And we just can't do it anymore. So we start sending them. They're all over the place now. Foster kids. So you have all of those dynamics that were not there before. And now, how do we educate with all these things? Schools are being asked to do things that they were never intended to do. Schools were there to teach. Now teachers are being asked to be parents. When the parents, and in fact, and Sharon, as you know this, if you're principal means you're the, what is it, parentis in locis? means the parent when the parent's not there. That's that principal role, right?
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Schools are being asked to do things that they never were intended to do. You got to have the food because guess what? Mom is not that wealthy. And when it starts getting to the middle of the month, she's selling some of those EBT, or she's doing something to get some money in that house. And the kids' school is feeding the kids. So schools are all over the place. And there's a system, but the system is broken. It's broken.
The other thing the systems were getting caught up in is the automation technology. So there was a point where kids just couldn't afford computers. Now they're buying computers for these kids. There's a computer in every classroom. And then at some schools, the kids get to keep the computers and take them home at no cost. So and then you have the thing with the phones in the school. There was a time when the kids would be on the phone while the teacher's teaching. What the heck are we going to do? So in New York, the governor of New York, they passed a law where no phones in the classroom. And so all the schools had to develop their own technique for getting these phones and giving them back. And then now you have the AI movement. And that's a big push to level the playing field. So, I hear teachers saying, and I don't know. Sometimes I think they're afraid of it because how do I use this thing? And the kids are using it. So I heard a kid graduate from a school, and she comes back and she's talking to the teachers, and the teachers are saying, "So are you using AI in college?" And she's an honor student in high school. She says, "Yeah, I use AI." She said, "Well, what do you think about the teachers?" She's surrounded all these teachers. What do you think about high school kids using AI? And the student said it's unavoidable. So what can we do? She says, this was brilliant. And this reminded me of Miss Brown when I first met her. She says, you got to teach students the writing process. So they understand the process of writing. They understand how to make AI work for them to learn more rather than to copy or so that's the point that we're going. But I think leadership is about problem solving. Great leaders know there's 3 forms of problem solving. And I learned that as an operations consultant. It's identification, solution, and implementation. And a lot of times the solution is good, but the implementation is not proper.
Exactly. Let me jump right there, and then I'm going to shut down. All right. I found some information. I had heard about it, but I kind of learned a lot more. So I wrote a post. 6 countries just admitted something went wrong in their classrooms. Sweden, Finland, Norway, Denmark, and France and Italy are quietly pulling tablets from schools and bringing them back. Printed textbooks, pens, and paper. They're pulling it out because they realize that it is causing short-term memory, causing our students to have short-term memory. So how do we admit when we spend all this money on something and we put all these tablets in the schools and we say this is the way, we're going in this direction, but we see something going wrong and we don't do anything about it. So
here, well, I was just going to say the problem with technology in the classroom is that it's not being used. It's being used for the sake of being used. And that's the problem. This concept of real world learning integrates technology in the classroom in a way that's real. So if in the real world, I'm using my phone to take pictures of something that resonates with me, then I have an opportunity to take that picture and then connect that image with some text to also explain how that image reveals my intention. That's a different use of technology than I have a program or a software application and I'm entering information
where people outside of the profession dictate what happens in the profession. So in the US, the business world says, hey, I'm not getting qualified employees. The students, their educational level is so low or whatever. You got to do something. That's what's sprung forth something called Goals 2000. So the business world says they got to be able to do this, they got to be able to do that, blah, 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 blah. So they start dictating to the professionals how it should happen. And as you remember, to me, the teachers, they're on the front line. They know what they understand the needs a lot better. So if they had more of a voice, if they were able to design a little bit more of what happens in the classroom, we'd probably see a difference.
It's interesting you talk about businesses dictating certain things, and you also mentioned higher education institutions preparing students for a corporate or that kind of feeder situation that perpetuates further indoctrination, in my opinion, because human beings should be allowed to enter the world based on their strengths, not based on whatever business opportunity exists on the other side of that, because then they're, back to Marion's point, what are we doing it for? What are we doing it for? Are we doing it to feed the corporations? Are we doing it to become an institution that feeds people through the jobs? Are we doing it in that way? Or are we doing it in a way that brings people to their self and gives students an opportunity to decide, what do I want? I think it was Everett that said they determine whether they want to be the cashier, the manager, so on and so forth. And that agency associated with their ability to even think for themselves in terms of what do I want to do is a big part of what I think should be included in education.
Quick point, why do we educate? Why does our government pay for it? It's because there is something in our Constitution that says that the Bill of Rights, we have a right to an education, but it's basically, when we say an education, what does that mean? It means that students must be educated to be able to go and vote. That's it. So we technically teach high school in the 6th grade level, and that's factual. So what does educating them, giving them enough information or teaching them enough so that they are able to go and understand what they're doing when they vote?
What is it like what is it like in Austria, Marion? Like what's the ultimate goal for education in Austria?
That's why I wanted to add this, because and I lived in the US for years, right? 8 years. So it's not like I just stayed there for a semester or so and I'm making up my own mind about things that I observed. But that's why I was asking. There are different concepts, obviously, and many European countries, not just Austria, and I'm just talking about Europe now because I have very deep insights in some countries. There is a more philosophical approach to education. And that's why, and also historically, a very long philosophical approach to education, because of the very old universities that were, the first universities were, of course, not in Europe, but in the end, we have hundreds of years old universities. So the education system is for the mere knowledge of educating topics, sciences, social studies, physical education, so you don't just sit around all the time. But has a different goal than the US education system. That's why I was asking, because in the US, for instance, you can pick and choose different classes, or even if you have math, you can pick, do you rather want to go into geometry or trigonometry, or do you rather do algebra, or what have you. So our education system and many other European countries, it's pre-given by the Board of Education to include as much classical, current, and potentially future topics as possible. And we have no choices, right? For 12 years, let's say you go all the way through high school, you have no choices. The kids don't necessarily like it. But the reason is, if I'm not already predisposed towards music, for instance, and I have a choice to not take it, I would maybe never know that I'm talented in one instrument or whatever. So all our classes are throughout all the years. The topics are always the same, and they're German, English, one other language. It's math, it's physics, it's chemistry, it's art, it's music, history, geography. So there are many hours that keep repeating and leveling up all the time. I think, really honest to heaven, for the sake of knowledge.
What role does sports play in that?
Mm-hmm.
What role does sports play in that educational system?
Okay. We don't call it sports, but just physical education in the sense of movement, right? Just movement. So there are 4 hours, I think, or 5 hours each week of physical education. Then whatever they do, running, climbing, different whatever, I don't know, soccer.
Well, you do have kids that play pro sports in Europe, right?
And then
I'll go to the Olympics.
This is what the parent, because you said when we were talking earlier, well, a kid has parents, and so the parent is the first source of educating the kid. In Europe, the sports are then up to the parents. So if it's usually then after school that the kids go to some particular sports team, different ones maybe, and this is where the parents then bring the kids to the sports teams. So that's not within the school. The physical education, the movement, the athletics, yes, but not the competitive sports. They are outside of school.
Mm-hmm. So you guys have like a universal curriculum, so every school is teaching the same thing?
Yes, and this is what I'm getting at. It's, I guess, for the sake of knowledge, to provide input that maybe, let's say my parents are lawyers, which they are not, right? Then obviously I would be kind of predisposed to law just because I maybe hear it all the time, right? So that's why this is this universal system. And then throughout the years, the schools have the same funding depending on how many kids are there. So the system is in place, the funding is in place, and they really do have much more time. And this is where we are more lucky than you. You are more lucky in many other things, but they have really more time to then provide for the children in a different manner. They don't have to search for food for the kids. They don't have to search for textbooks for whatever. So there is a little bit of benefit to that.
I have a question. Mm-hmm. So with the universal curriculum, and we're talking about innovation, how do they make the updates, and how do teachers implement innovative ideas in the classroom?
Okay. Every year there are updates every year, depending on whatever it is. For instance, now they have just updated. They want to take 1 hour per week away from a dead language, because we also learn Latin or ancient Greek. You have to pick one of the two. 1 hour away for that. And they replaced it. I don't think they came up with the correct name yet, but something like critical digital information or something like that, where 1 hour per week. The name of the class is not clear yet. They engage in, well, how do you decide what's correct? Like what Mr. Stembridge just said about AI in class, or why do we use the phones in class, or why don't we use them? How do I make sure that if I read just a summary of a book, that I really get the gist of the book and not just a summary that maybe even some AI wrote. So every year there are changes.
Yeah. And who dictates those changes? Like, is it a top-down approach? Is it more collaborative?
Mm-hmm. No, it's somehow collaborative because throughout the year they collect information from all schools. I don't know, they have a system, I'm not in the educational school system like middle high school, but they collect it throughout the year. Then the Minister of Education has his staff, then they discuss it, they put it out to representatives, school representatives who have some feedback. So it's not top down, but in the end, of course, the one who has the money decides, yes, but they have a different mindset. They don't have the mindset of we just provide for businesses what we do.
What kind of autonomy do teachers have? And I would love for everybody to answer this. Like, what kind of autonomy do teachers have to do real world learning type projects where maybe they're taking students into the community, or they're taking learning into the community, or they're bringing community into the classroom, or just anything that would position them in a way where they would have to use the skills that they're building in a real world way?
I'll just answer that question because that way then I'll stay quiet for half an hour again.
Jump in.
For us, what they do is, for instance, the universities, they usually have also the public library within the university library system somehow. So per definition there, the community is already connected with education, and the little ones go out and we go in, more or less. The schools go, if you come visit, I would gladly, everybody can come visit. I will gladly host you and show you around. But the schools are always going around. There are obligatory field trips. The teachers can decide. For instance, I collaborate with schools a lot if I do something special, or if I have all my students are internationals anyways, and then I organize international research weeks. Then I always invite some high school classes, obviously the ones that want to come and the one that I can integrate logically in whatever it is that we're doing at the moment, or we go there. So there's a lot of collaboration, but that one is, yes, now going back to what Delores said, it's the leadership of the school. Of course, you have to empower your teachers, right? And then you have to have the teacher that wants to do it too, because it's the additional set of work. But they are not very limited. They can, and many of them do. They're not very limited. And in an obligatory manner, they have to do at least 2 excursions or trips or visits to something like a museum or businesses each semester. So in one school year, at least 4 day trips they have to go on, a teacher with his or her class, at least, but many do more. And then they do, yes, then it's of course more the interest of the head teacher. Maybe if the interest is of the head teacher is a lot in arts, let's say, then they might also visit a business that is somehow related with arts and go to a museum or whatever, or to a play. That they don't dictate that.
Well, when you talk about that, I think the United States has a broad program, and you have schools. For example, you might have, when the small schools, you might have a school that just focus on systems. You might have a school that just focus on students who want to become nurses, and you have a school that might focus on students who want to work with computers. And so there's a broad opportunity for students to be involved in something that they love to do. You have schools that are, for law, but ultimately it starts with the leadership and the focus on excellence. And like I said, there's identification, there's a solution, and then there's implementation. And so in the implementation of these goals is where things are lost. You have students going on trips, and you have the inquiry method and all these different methodologies that are being used. But ultimately, I think that the goal should focus on how do we inspire the individual student to want more. and to want to grow more and learn more and be more motivated and go beyond what's happening in terms of the classroom. And I think that's the issue. We have systems and we have programs, and America is very competitive. We work on that model, the entrepreneurship, the laissez-faire model, and we excel, and we take folks come from other countries to be a part of our system. But ultimately, when you talk about these systems, you're going to talk about the kids that are stuck at the bottom. And how do we uplift those students so that they become the best version of themselves? And I believe that it's an incorporation, and you call it agency. I call it character education. But to make them more aware of, this is America. You got to be able to compete. This thing called education, it's about competition. You want to make it in America, you got to be ready. You got to be on your
now
game.
you finally said it. It's about the competition from little kids on.
Oh yeah, it's real. I mean, if they can't read,
how are we talking collaboration and community and all these things that are supposed to make us more communal and supportive and of each other, while still reinforcing individual
excellence,
competition,
to be the best version of yourself. Yeah, that's what it's all about. When you step into the classroom, I mean, when I teach, I tell kids, successful people do 4 things every day. I go ROLE: read, observe, listen, and evaluate. So you got mathematics, you got science, but this is something you have to do every day. And when you do that, you're going to be successful. But when kids are not doing those types of things every day, then they don't reach their full potential. But they have to be aware of the fact that this is what they need to do, so they can be in positions of power and authority. Why should I see someone walking down the street in my neighborhood begging for $1 or a quarter, and they're younger than me, but they didn't understand these opportunities? And you have people come from other countries that come in and they take advantage. And I've had my own business. My son, I have a son who's a very successful entrepreneur. I have a son that's a police officer. But there's different experiences, but it's those who are stuck at the bottom who are not utilizing the opportunities that the educational system in America has. And it all goes back to the leadership. And that's when I talking about what's the title? Learning in could you repeat it for me?
Leading real world
right.
learning.
Leading real world's about becoming the best. We look at the New York Knicks. They did it with teamwork. There's nothing wrong with being the best version of yourself and competing and still collaborating. But
I'm gonna have to disagree, because okay. I feel like the new generation is shifting that, and they're changing the way that we look at everything. They don't care about nothing but mental health and being healthy. That's all they care about. So when you talk about competition, they don't even believe in competition because they look at everything as equal. They don't identify each other as anything. Like, it's our whole, and we have to move with that in education too. Like, we have to shift in how we teach kids and how we look at things and prepare them for the real world, because it's changing and we can't do anything about it because it's the way that they have been raised, and they're just shifting everything in the world. I mean, prime example, I'm a sneakerhead. I love sneakers. And I remember growing up, I used to buy Jordans all the time. It was such a big deal. Now the shoes I used to long for are just available because their priorities have changed, and they're not looking at things like, look at me, look at me, look at me. They're looking at, how am I? How do I feel? What am I thinking? How can I translate? Like, they are just shifting. And I have a 13-year-old, so I'm seeing it like real world. I see how how their generation is just shifting everything, and we have to keep up in education. So when we talk about like The key is knowing, and I agree with you with the acronym, because they do need to learn those things. They do need to be able to identify how and when, but it's all about them, their identity and how they feel about themselves. And then how do we translate that to them as they're entering the real world?
Well, you know, I go to a different school every year, and I hear the same story that you just told. And when I get in there, it changes. How do you have a team go 14-0 or 0 for 14? And then when you speak to those kids, you find that those kids are not motivated. Those kids don't understand the concept of effort. Nothing happens in the world without effort. You got to lift that pen up and put pen to paper. You understand? You know, well, my mom used to say, and it don't change.
But maybe because the kid is not motivated for what you want them to do, does not mean they're not motivated.
So it's more intrinsic.
But see, that's not what I didn't say what I want. They got to find, that's what I said, the best version of themselves. And a lot of folks don't like that. They don't like to see kids motivated. For example, I was at the front door. You have a school that has you don't have that in Europe, I don't think. They have metal detectors. These kids go to school every day through metal detectors. They got 5 different schools in there. They got an international school for kids from all over the world. They have a school for systems engineering. They have a school for medical. They have a school for language
school. Everett? Is it in the Bronx?
No, that's in Washington Irving.
Yeah.
Okay, so they got all these 5, and the kids come and they don't see. I know my son. I went to John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy didn't have metal detectors when I went there, so my son went there because I went there, and he called me. Said, "Dad, I can't go to this school every day. I go to school. I feel like a criminal." So I said, "Dad, these kids are feeling."
Oh wow!
So put me at the front door. I go to the front door, and I say, "Good morning. How you doing?" "Okay, let's go. We got to go get it." You understand? And we go. The message that goes throughout the whole building is they love this guy. Why? Because I'm waking them up. I'm making them think, and I'm making good morning. How are you? Show some love. You know, this is the place. This is a place to be.
What you're doing is you're penetrating that situation by connecting with them internally. And I think that's what Sharnez is saying, is that education can't focus exclusively on cognitive development. Cognitive development is what is the measurement that we're using to determine success. So, you know, I talked about this a lot in episode 6, this Bloom's taxonomy. So we're getting them from that recall level all the way up to construction. And there's, 5 different, avenue or levels that they would need to go up, comprehension and analysis and synthesis and, all these things. And so the complexity, the intellectual complexity will determine the success, as you say, that they're having in the classroom, because that's what we're measuring. But to Sharnez's point, measuring their cognitive development within this new generation is not enough. Because if I'm coming to school and I'm feeling, if I'm coming to school and I'm feeling sad because I've had something happen in my life that morning that's impacting my ability to learn, then this social emotional realm would be able to address some of those potential impediments to learning.
You see how? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you see how it goes right back to schools are being asked to do, teachers. The whole system is being asked to do things that it was never designed to do. But they have to do it. I mean, for example, when I became a teacher, high school English teacher, and when you start describing the school, I'm like, hey, you got to be talking about the old Roosevelt High School out on Fordham Road. It's just like, and when you said Washington, the buildings are similar. 4,000 students, more than 4,000 students in one high school, right? Okay, so your issue here is these students, many were immigrants, okay? And so you had all kinds of things going on. It was set up so much so that we ended up with a daycare in the basement. because many of the kids had kids.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
We had a dentist's office in the basement because we had this principal. She was always out there trying to get whatever the kids need. She became superintendent too. And so anyhow, we had a dentist's office there. We had a daycare. We had all kinds of stuff going on in that building because it was like, okay, the kids need this. Let's bring this in. Let's bring that in. And I'm not opposed to that because you help kids when you can. That's your job. But when you think about it, how were schools designed to operate? What were the original foundational principles and what systems originally started? And now we've got a society that has all these societal ills that we have to address. Like when I said, in the 80s, crack ravished our communities. It went all the way up almost to the 90s. So you're talking 30-something years ago. These are the parents now of the kids in school. Some are grandparents, okay? So they had a lot of this dysfunctionalism just took place. So now you're talking about something that is just so far removed from what it was originally intended to be. So how do you harness it? How do you take it and create the systems that are necessary? Like Sharnez said something about this new generation. So the challenge is, do we leave them there, or do we, who have had different experiences, intervene and show them other ways? Because guess what? We're becoming a global society, right? The future of humanity is where? In Africa. The largest population of young people are where? In Africa. So it's a whole global change that's taking place. And if our students don't understand what it means to compete, to become the best that they can be, and they're stuck on, and I don't mean this in a negative way. Please don't take it that way when I say something. Maybe I use a different term. But when they are,
they'll get left behind. They'll get left behind. And you talk about a lot of these. You have a lot of these kids from Africa and New York. You have a lot of the kids from Mexico and all these various countries. And not all of them are motivated, but many of them are. And if we don't have these kids become motivated, and everyone is capable of wanting more out of life. I mean, in the Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson, he says the basic things that a kid, he says, I have it written down somewhere, but I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head. But they have to learn to live abundantly. They have to want more out of life. Even your kids, Sharnez, if they don't want more out of life, it's not gonna happen. But they do.
I don't disagree with that.
I don't think she's saying that. No, I'm not even. But I'm saying the cognition. I think she's saying that we need to add this intrinsic value to their educational experience.
But I think that is a part of it. No, I understand what you're saying. But to me, as an educator, as a leader, as a principal, that is all connected. You cannot separate it. So why does he say learn to live abundantly? He's saying you have to want more out of the world. Why does he say accept the world as you find it? That means we cannot change everything. And then he says to make it better. Those are the three things, to make it better. So if we want to make it better, we want to get back to society. That's part of who we are.
But does that mean competition, though? Or does that mean
you compete with yourself? Some people are afraid of that word competition.
When
you apply for a job,
I think it means both, Sharnez. And the reason why I think it means both is because you can't have motivation without success. If you're motivated, then intrinsically you're balanced. You're regulated. Yeah. You're able to self-regulate. You're able to recognize I'm uncomfortable in this situation and this is how I'm going to, so the social emotional piece has to be balanced with the cognitive development. It's not one or the other. And when that's happening, when you're addressing that social emotional piece, then you're able to bring a higher level of learning and cognition to the skill-based work. And so when those two things are balancing each other, then the success can happen. So the competition will happen, but it'll be what we call healthy competition. Not I'm better than you, but I'm good at what I do.
And I guess I'm looking at it because I'm elementary. So you guys are a higher ed. So I'm looking at it like I'm just a big ball of emotions and I love everybody. So I'm looking at it completely differently. Because I was in talking to Dolores's point, I was in a very high needs school and I saw those babies that had parents from the 80s. And the dysregulation is unmanageable. Like I can't even act like it's something, it's unmanageable. And imagine 400 kids with those same dysregulations happening all at the same time. And they're getting out of cars that smell like, certain plants, and they're coming down, and a lot is going on. So when I'm talking about competition, you can't speak competition to them because immediately they're going to be triggered. And then that's going to make them even more aggressive. If you start talking about competition, even if you start trying to do something that's above their academic level, shuts down. So you have to take care of the social, the emotional first. In my world, in elementary, I have to. Like, I don't have a choice. I have to really build, like you said, character, because I have to treat them. I have to show them how to regulate themselves, different strategies, all while still trying to hit the academics too. And it's hard. It's very difficult.
But
you're right.
Those kids need love at that level.
Because
you can give them all the love, but if they're not getting it at home, there's nothing you can do. You can just try to love them as much as you can.
Let me intervene in that now. I hear you, Sharnez. It's a hard road to plow, but I've seen it happen. You can. There are things that there are some people right now, and I love listening to documentaries. Okay, there are people who said they would have never made it if it wasn't for a teacher, right? Because everybody died on them and they ended up in foster care and they went from one home to the other. But the only constant in their life was Miss Rosemary, who was the teacher who just loved. And when they had to do, it was this story I remember vividly where they had to do, they gave Christmas presents. Everybody brought a little present. This one little kid, he didn't have anything except something from his mother, a ring or something. It wasn't even that great, but he wrapped it up in a little piece of paper and he gave it to her. And she pretended like it was the greatest gift of all. And because of that kid took that with him, that love with him. Yeah. So that's what I mean by teachers are being asked to do things they never were really intended to do. But that social emotional piece, when they're young like that, you gotta address it because they haven't learned how to control it. But as they grow, they've got to have both before they get out in the real world, or they won't be successful. And we're no longer competing with our neighbor schools or in our neighborhood. We're no longer competing from state to state, St. Louis and Sumter or New York City and Miami. No, we're outside of that now. And as we progress, our kids have to be ready. We are falling so far behind in education, and a lot of it is dealing with this social ills and all of the politics and all the stuff inside. And so the system's broken.
But I think that's all. I think that's all the more reason why bringing this intrinsic value to their learning is so essential. And I heard you say, it's happening at elementary. They're emotional, they're babies, they're kids. But let me tell you, the curriculum that I developed and just published in my dissertation is about bringing agency to English composition that's happening in higher ed. And so the idea is that we're balancing their ability to embody their learning experience at that level. So the embodiment is connected to this social emotional piece. How do I feel about what I'm learning? How am I connecting to what I'm learning? It comes back to that I placement, that I am, right? I believe. Right?
When I first came to education, I taught elementary school. And they had me go from I think I was a teacher who came in when another teacher had needed a break. in the elementary school system. I forgot what they call that, but they always wanted me the day of a test. Teacher would say, the elementary school, send them to my class, because whenever he comes and we have a test the next period after he leaves, the kids score very high. Mm-hmm. But I was working on the intrinsic motivation, excitement.
Correct.
I did a third grade kid. I came up with this curriculum, had this big poster with a guy on a glider. It was orange and white and red, and he was on a glider. And I talked about what is a glider and all of these different things. And then I started out with the song by Beth Midler, The Hero, and had the kids listen to that, and they do their little outline. Then I'd go with The Hero Lies in You. You know that by
right.
And then I would end with You Can't Touch This. Do. And all the kids to get up and they start dancing and then they would write essays. You think they were in the 6th grade because I build up to that. I talked about a glide and who makes things easier for you to move through the world. And then, when we listen to that song, it clicks. The music is powerful. And whether I did that,
but you believed in them.
But whether I did that same lesson, it worked in the 3rd grade, it worked in the 11th grade.
Sure. That's right.
Kids, they may not be able to write an essay, but they can read whether or not you really care about them. And they're trying to. They're gonna check you out and see, do you really care about us? And then when you can get to the point that you can connect with them and speak to them, and then you're able to help them to rise up. They will, if you raise the bar, they will meet it, because you know what? My teacher said. My teacher said.
You're right.
And kids even go home, they tell their parents, well, what do you do? No. My teacher said we have to do this because they believe. So you have to develop, you have to empower. You're empowered.
I did not know this conversation was going to move in this direction. I'm so grateful. I just, because I was like, oh, we're going to talk about real world. How's real world? I mean, I still would like to know how,
That is real world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just young, though.
There you go. It's
you have to plant the seed young.
I would add that I would get a 20 words they're going to have on the test next period. And I would make that to a rhyme. And we would walk through the classroom with the train, dancing, dun, 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 smell the weather, dun, dun. And all the kids just going, dun, dun. And the teachers say, wow, what is this guy doing? And I was like everyday sub. And from there, I went into middle school. And the same thing was happening. But it wasn't any different from problem identification, solution, implementation, but it was no different from being a management analyst or industrial engineer. How can I increase the performance of these young people in front of me? I have to ignite. And music is one of the most powerful ways to do that.
Yes, it is.
I use music every day.
The art.
Every single day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This has been so good, you guys. I just want to, before we close, I just want to land one last question for the entire group. What is one thing educators need most from school leaders? What's the one thing educators need most from school leaders?
Information, I would say, even if it's not a spectacular answer, but information is in any organization and also in schools. Like, you don't know who to ask sometimes when you need something specific. Like, where do I get the funds for something? What am I allowed to do? What am I not allowed to do? Where are we going with this? What is our goal, at least in this school, right? You don't know so many things sometimes. Like, you would have maybe a leader or some superior that would support you, but you don't even know who it is, right? So there's such a lack of information oftentimes in communication transfer. So I think the information is the first step.
Okay.
Because most of us who are in education, no matter if it's higher ed or kindergarten or whatever school, I mean, we don't make the money we used to make when we were in the corporate world, right? So we're in it for the good already anyways. We're already so motivated and love our kids or students, or even if they're adults like 70-year-olds, but then they're still our students, right? So we love them anyways. So that's why I'm saying, so I think we have the best intent already anyways, but oftentimes the information is missing on so many different steps. So I'll go with information for now.
I like that. I like that. I like that. I do think we need to have more of these conversations, share more of this balancing act, bring more of this shift and this change via information to our educators. So yeah, absolutely. I think information would be good.
The first word that came for me was trust. You have to be able, they want trust for you to trust them to, number one, be themselves in the classroom, because I think that is important. Take care of kids, handle them with care, and just facilitation, caring about knowing that every student has a right to education and handling that with care as well when you're facilitating whatever curriculum that you have.
I love that. I read a book years ago by Stephen Covey Jr. called The Speed of Trust. I don't know if anybody has read that, but it's a very foundational book in building trusting relationships and how actually anything can thrive on that bond. So having trust between educators and school leaders is definitely monumental, I would say, for sure.
I would say support. They need support. And that support comes in many forms, whether it is supporting them in what they believe is the right thing to do in the classroom. Sometimes teachers want to do something new and unique, like in some schools, like whatever it talked about, he's playing music in his classroom. You walk in the classroom and the leader goes in for an observation. They think something's wrong with that. But teachers know their students most of the times. They're on that front line. So you have to support them. And then giving them opportunities. It's always good for teachers to have a place to vent. Okay? Giving them that support of whatever it is that they need, if you find a way to do it. There are things in classrooms that's needed badly. You may know Mrs. Jones, she likes to use construction paper when she teaches, and she's been buying it out of her pocket. Why not support her? Find a way. Administrators can do a lot. There's a lot that they can do, but sometimes they're so focused on what they cannot do, and they come from a negative perspective, and it just really makes you can just lose some of your best teachers that way. And I believe if we gave them more support, they would stick around a lot longer, because most of the times if you talk to teachers, a lot of them will tell you it's not necessarily the kids. It's all this other stuff.
You want to bring us home, Everett?
Yeah.
One thing educators need most from school leaders.
Well, I would still go back to that model of problem solving, identifying what are the needs of my teachers, what are the needs of the community, and then solution. What is the solution that's going to bring those two things we talked about together? And then the implementation, because in all three of those stages you can make mistakes. So you have to understand how to problem solve, identify, solution, implementation. And I think the important key is understanding that young people have to be inspired to want to become the best version of themselves. And that's something that is human nature. That's born with them. I have a granddaughter, a grandson. They have curiosity. they want to learn. And but how do parents stifle that, and rather than encouraging it? One of the things we may want to look at is on the elementary school level is a solution or implementation of something that can help parents become better. You cannot, especially at that young level, and I noticed when I was with Miss Brown, when we was at the school we were at, when it started from 3rd grade all the way up to 12th grade. And I said to Miss Brown, I said, these teachers are different. I said, the elementary school teachers are so emotional. And then, you got the middle school teachers, it was different than the 12th grade teachers. She said, that's how it is. They have to be that way for the different grade levels. And I remember speaking, the parents are more involved at that early level. That's an opportunity for elementary school leaders and principals to begin to take advantage of that and to facilitate parenting, because kids don't come with a manual. There's no perfect parent, but
I love that. I didn't even think about, and I love what you said earlier about this ecosystem. Like, that's really resonating with me, that there are multiple people participating in this educational experience, the teacher, the parents, the administrator. So this has been so good. Did you guys have a good time?
Yes.
I asked that at the end of the
last to see Miss Brown. Haven't seen her.
I'm like, was this a good time? And they're like, yeah, this was a good time.
Miss Brown's the best administrator I ever met. Yeah, she works.
Everett, I'd give you a raise if you were still working with me.
I mean, just based on the camaraderie that you two have is reinforcing the very first thing that we talked about: cross-curricular collaboration. Everett said inspire, so that leans into Sharnez's social emotional realm. I mean, anytime we're talking about in anything, that's internal, which gets us into that whole self-awareness piece. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. Yeah. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Educate Us. Educate Us is a podcast and learning collective of TMS Visionary Group. All podcast content is protected by copyright. Copyright 2026 TMS Visionary Group, all rights reserved. New episodes are released every Monday. Thank you for joining the conversation.